Guess who's back?
Who's back?
Back again.
Back again.
Marla's back.
Marla's back. Tell a friend.
Nolan ide kauna oi do gaba ulai seu pohiwi e holalan ieta ulura e tumaso e onai oi.
Aloha mai kako. Today we are here at Keahikawelo, which is in the ahupua'a of Ka'a, which is the largest ahupua'a on the island of Lanai. This is the northern side of the island, and Keahikawelo is a storied place here in this ahupua'a. So Keahikawelo translates to the fire of Kawelo, which relates to a traditional story of this place, which will be told in a later video. Commonly, people call this area Garden of the Gods, but we're trying to encourage everyone to call it by its proper place name, which is Keahikawelo. Garden of the Gods was actually a misnomer given to this place by a visitor to Lanai in the early 1900s. It really has no relevance to this landscape or this area, and so we really encourage you and your families to say Keahikawelo. So here at Keahikawelo, this landscape is extremely barren and arid, dry, but it didn't always used to look like this. So typically, this area in traditional times would have been covered in ancient dryland forest, would have been very lush and covered in vegetation. But the reason why it looks so dry today is because of the introduction of ungulates such as deer, goats, and sheep to Lanai, which really ravaged the landscape. So they went through eating all of the native vegetation, leaving these bare tracts of land exposed. And why that's bad is because it causes erosion. So erosion is a typically natural force that occurs, but this is not natural because this area was supposed to be covered in forest. So some of the things that cause erosion include wind and rain. When it rains, if there is no vegetation to cover the ground, then that dirt just ends up running down the landscape and eventually into the ocean in an unnatural way. With wind, as you can tell, it's very windy today. That also acts upon the landscape and cutting away at the dirt and sediment and washing them to a place or blowing them to a place they're not supposed to be. If you look at some of the rocks behind me, you can see some of the erosive forces at work, carving into the rock, which is why they're falling apart. But if this area was covered in the healthy native vegetation that it's supposed to be covered in, then those erosive forces wouldn't be as extreme. So while this landscape is very interesting, it is actually not what Keahikawelo is supposed to look like. And so we hope that through future restoration efforts, we'll hopefully be able to bring back health to this area. Now we'll transition from Keahikawelo to Kanepu'u. Kanepu'u is a great example of what Keahikawelo would have looked like prior to the deforestation that occurred here. And so the dryland forest that would have been here at Keahikawelo, we'll go take a look at now at Kanepu'u.
Aloha mai kako and welcome to Kanepu'u. So Kanepu'u literally means the hill of Kane. We just came from Keahikawelo, which is in the same ahupua'a of Ka'a and literally just down the road. But as you can see, the natural landscape looks much different here at Kanepu'u. We are so fortunate to be able to still have our native dryland forest here. And when we say native forest, we mean the forest as it would have existed in traditional times. Alright, so you folks might be wondering why Keahikawelo and Kanepu'u are so close together but look entirely different. And one of the main reasons for that is the fence that's up. So in the 1900s, when George Monroe was here on Lanai, he noticed how fragile and important the forest was in Kanepu'u. So he decided to fence all of these acres in, about 580 acres. And that's why we're still able to have the living forest that we have today, along with a bunch of hard work by our community members to sustain the native dryland forest. So one of our main goals for Eikeho is to try to help you build personal connections to Aina, with the hopes that eventually when you grow up and throughout the years that you will want to be better stewards of Aina and take care of it. And so Kanepu'u is a great example of a legacy that we've been left today that helps us understand that this Aina was cared for before us, and it will hopefully be cared for by and after us. And so for me, my grandpa Solomon Ka'opuiki was very involved in helping out here at Kanepu'u and kind of across the island to take care of what is left of our natural landscapes. And so legacy is a huge theme for this place and me. So I encourage you guys to think about what the legacy that you inherit is. So what are the things that people before you have done that you inherit today? And then think about in the future, like what kind of legacy do you want to leave as a person, right? Because each of us will leave something behind, whether it be positive or negative. And so if we look at Keahiakavelo, right, that's one example of a legacy of how to leave a landscape. But Kanepu'u is also an example of a legacy. And so you really have the agency in deciding what that looks like.
This is the mo'olelo of Keahiakavelo. Kavelo was a kahuna or spiritual figure on the island of Lanai who was responsible for the well-being and health of its people. Long ago, there was a time when Lanai people were falling ill, and Kavelo realized it was because Lani Kaula, a powerful kahuna on the island of Molokai, was sending bad prayers to this island. Lani Kaula was famous because he was known for his ability to predict how someone would pass away. So Kavelo paddled his canoe across the Kalohi Channel with caution because he knew how powerful Lani Kaula was. He figured out that Lani Kaula was hiding his kukai, or excrement, on the island of Mokuho'oniki off the coast of Molokai. So he paddled there, concealed this kukai in a hollowed out sweet potato or uwala, and before coming back to Lanai, he wanted to see just how powerful Lani Kaula was. And so he walked past his hale to see if Lani Kaula would be able to predict his own impending death. Lani Kaula did not look up from what he was doing, and so Kavelo thought, he must not be as powerful as everyone thinks he is. He sailed back across the Kalohi Channel to the island of Lanai, and in the ahupua'a of Ka'a, he created a great fire. Into it, he threw Lani Kaula's kukai, and from the fire billowed a large pillar of dark smoke. This smoke was said to go into the flowers of that area, particularly the ohi'alehua flowers, and there is a dark purple blossom that was said to be only known in this area. On Molokai, Lani Kaula realized what had happened just before he passed away, and through this, Kavelo was able to save the people of Lanai, and we honor this tradition by calling this area its proper name, Keahiakavelo, the Fire of Kavelo. We hope you will join us in showing respect for this place by passing down this knowledge and calling this area Keahiakavelo.
Here in Kanepu'u, like we mentioned earlier, it literally translates to the hill of Kane, right? And so Kane is one of the 4 major akua or gods in Hawaiian culture. And Kane comes in different forms. So he's often known as the god of fresh water or the god of sunlight, amongst other things. And the presence of Kane on Lanai is very, very strongly felt. Kane in many different forms has inhabited Lanai, been here. It's been part of his story for a long time. And so one story in particular, one mo'olelo that we like to tell about Kanepu'u is in regards to a while ago, Hawaiians were enduring a famine or a period of time when there are a scarcity of resources. So there's not enough food for everybody, maybe not enough fresh water, things like that. And so in this time, we know of a boy, a young man named Pakiaolani, and his father, Kaimua Hanahana, and they noticed this famine happening right around them. They noticed the lack of food. And so what Pakiaolani did was that he gathered all of the food that he could find, even through this famine. He put it in an imu and then prepared it and offered it to his gods as a kind of plea to please help us, right? And so through that, his father came, Koimuahanahana came and asked him for the food, but Pakeaolani said, no, I've offered it to the gods, we need to leave it there. So what happens after that is Kane, in a form of Kane Pa'ina, comes to Pakeaolani and says, okay, what I need you to do is thatch up all of your hale, close everything, make sure that it's all secure, and you're gonna stay in there. And you cannot go outside, don't look, don't peek, don't anything, regardless of all of the sounds that are happening around you. You need to just stay in your hale. Right, and so he does so. He starts to patch up all of the holes in his hale so that it's completely secure, and he stays in there for days. And so Pakeaolani hears all of these different noises. He hears rain, he hears storms, all of these things happening outside of him, but true to his word, he stays in there. He doesn't look outside or anything. And then all of a sudden, all of these noises stop, and Pakeaolani looks outside and he sees an abundance of food everywhere. So there are sweet potato, there are pigs roaming around, and there's enough food to feed this community of Hawaiians. And so from there, it changed from a famine mindset into an abundance mindset, and Hawaiians were able to repopulate and become a strong lahui, or nation, again.
I hope you guys enjoyed this week's STEM activity. See you next week.
Shoot them!